Hi everybody, welcome back. This is our third video in the Homestead House series, and today we're going to be working on the interior walls. So let's get started. Okay, so the interior and the exterior walls of this house are also going to be made out of the same doubled up foam board that I used to put the foundation in. So all I did was glue two pieces together just like I did for the foundation. And again, I'll remind you, if you're going to do that, to make sure that you're weighting them down really well and giving them lots of time to dry so that they don't warp on you. But once you've got them together, you can cut them to whatever height you want to use for the wall, and then you can just measure out, your lengths. I'm also going to be using these wooden dowels, and I'm going to be using those to reinforce the walls. I think I might have mentioned that in one of the first videos. But basically, I'm going to be attaching this wooden dowel to the side of each of the pieces of wall. And I'm going to try and put a wood dowel about every 8 to 10 inches just to keep that strength up throughout. So these wood dowels are 8 7/8 inches high. And I bought them, you buy them in packages, and I just wanted to show you the package. I get these from the Dollarama. It's $2 for the package. You'll get 15 dowels in total, but for the size that we need, you're only going to get 5 per package. But I also use the other two. I use the smaller 1/4 inch ones when I'm making furniture. I have used the big ones when I'm making furniture for kids' dollhouses. And they also, I have a plan to do a house with an open beam ceiling, and I think those will work really well. I do like these because they are all exactly the same length. So I don't have to worry about one of them being, 1/8 of an inch longer than the rest of them, which of course will throw everything out. The first wall that we're going to tackle is the center wall that runs from the front of the house to the back. And we need to make sure that we leave a gap there for the doorway that goes from the kitchen to the living room. So the whole project measured out at 22 3/16 of an inch wide. But we're going to start with this first section, which is the bedroom. And that distance from the front of the house to the back of the bedroom wall is 10.5 inches. So that's what we're going to start with. Now you need to make sure, because I am going to be adding these posts on either side of the wall. These posts are 3/8 of an inch wide. So 2 of them together is 3/4 of an inch. And I need to make sure that I make allowances for that 3/4 of an inch when I'm cutting my foam board. So I have already gone ahead and measured out the first section. So this is the 9 3/4 inch piece, which is that first piece. And then I'm going to be attaching the wood dowels to each side. Now these wood dowels, most of them are going to be hidden in the wall and you're never going to see them, but there is the odd one that's going to be exposed, and you're going to be able to see them from inside the room. And I don't want them to be this wood color, so I'm going to go ahead and paint 4 or 5 of them just on one side, the side that'll be exposed into the room, so that you won't be able to see it. As I'm hoping that it's going to just kind of blend into the wall. All right. It did take about 3 coats to get it to the right shade of white, so I'm happy with that. So now we're going to go ahead and glue those on. Now my favorite wood glue is this Gorilla wood glue. It is thebomb.com. And it holds so well, and it sets up really quickly, so your drying time isn't as long as some of the others. So I'm just going to put a layer of glue. And I just have these little coffee stir sticks that I'm just going to use to spread the glue out a little bit. Probably put a little bit too much, so take that part off. And then I'm just going to attach it to the side. Press it nice and tight. I'm just going to use one more other piece just to make sure that I've got it flush on the bottom. and then we'll just hold it there for a minute, and then we'll attach the other side. So while I'm waiting for this to dry, I always like to give credit where credit is due, and everything that I know about miniaturing, I learned from somebody else. None of these are original ideas, and this particular technique came from Ara from Bentley House Minis. And so I totally stole this idea from her. If you're looking for a great miniaturist to have a look at, she's spectacular. She has a very interesting style. She's more along the lines of kind of spooky. She did the Addams Family house, which is unbelievable. And now she's doing the Beetlejuice. So she likes to do things that are a little aged, you know, abandoned rooms kind of thing. That is not at all my style. My style is a little bit, well, one of my flaws in my character, I guess, is that I strive for perfection because I fail miserably. But I like things that are maybe a little cleaner, which is fine. You know, whatever your style is what your style is. But don't discount watching people like Ara, even if her style is not the same as yours, because I think I have learned more from her than anybody else when it comes to, you know, different techniques and constructing things. She used to be an architect, so this gal knows her stuff. So anyway, you might want to check her out. Okay, so I think that one is on there pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and install this side. Try not to put quite as much glue this time. And with the white side up. Make sure I'm flush with the bottom. And we'll go ahead and hold that there. Okay, so we're going to go ahead now and cut the second section, which is going to be this piece. Turn that upside down on you. It will be this piece between the kitchen wall and the doorway into the living room. So that's our next step. The next piece is going to be 3 7/8 inches. And then I'm going to add the 3/8 inches for the wood dowel. And so that will make that little piece of wall 4 1/4 inches. I'm going to be using my square. If you have one, these are awesome. It'll make sure that your walls are straight. Just going to make pencil mark. And then I'll use my ruler to do the actual cut. All right. So this is going to attach to this side. And then we're again going to put another wood dowel in here. All right, so I've done my third piece. Now this is going to be the entryway. And so that entryway did not go all the way to the ceiling. There was a header. And so I'm going to cut a piece to put along the top so that I can join those pieces together. So I measured it out to give myself a 7-foot high walkway, which is 7 inches in miniature land. And then factoring in that I'm going to put a dowel on the bottom. That piece measured out to be 1.5 inches. 1.5 inches by 3 3/13 of an inch wide, 1.5 inches high. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that out. Right, so I've cut out my little piece of header here, and I want to now attach my piece of wood dowel on the bottom. Okay, I'll take these off. And we have our piece. I'm going to just do a little bit of sanding on that end, and then we'll put it onto the bottom of that piece. A little piece of sandpaper. Square. And then once that's dry, all we're going to do is install it up here. Okay, so I cut the piece and I put the dowel on, and now I'm just setting it in between the two walls. I want to make sure that if this distance is 3 13/16 inch, that this distance is also 3 13/16 inches as well. That's a mouthful, because again, you just want to make sure your walls are going to be square and straight when the time comes. I took the opportunity to paint those two top pieces, and I've done that on both sides, but I've decided that I'm not real crazy about how this looks for an inside wall. So I'm going to cover that up with a piece of paper just to make it a little bit less noticeable, because I'll bring it up and show you. There's little bits of gap in there, and I think it's way more noticeable than I thought it would be. I mean, certainly painting it white helped, but it's still a fairly large gap. So I'm going to cover that up with some white strips of paper. So I've cut a couple of pieces. Now you'll see that that makes a fair bit of difference, and I can live with the little bit different color of the paper, but I think it looks far better than that. Okay, so that's with the patch on. I think it looks quite a bit better. I've done the same up here, and then on the back side as well up here. I'm not going to do this one because this is an inside wall and you won't see this wall once the other bedroom wall comes out from it. There's a couple of techniques that I want to show you with regards to the wall treatments. These are things that you'll need to know before you actually install the walls into your house. In this first example, I just used one sheet of the foam board and I put 3 layers of acrylic paint on it. You can't weight it down when the paint is wet. And so when it dried, it was really warped. I'm just gonna, if I line it up here on my mat, you can see that there's a good 3/8, almost a half an inch curve in that piece of foam board. And if that's your wall, it's going to be a problem. In my second example, I took 2 pieces of foam board. So I glued them together first, weighted them down, let them dry, and then I painted them with, again, 3 coats of acrylic paint. Now, because of the width, it didn't curve or warp near as much as the first piece. But there is still a little bit of warping there. You can probably see we're almost 1/4 inch of a curve on this wall. For my third attempt, I did a combination of the two. So I took that original single ply, even though it was very warped. Once the paint was dry, I attached that then to a second piece of foam board. And what happened was, because the paint was completely dry, and the glue to attach the two was in between the 2 boards, I was able then to weight it down with some books until it dried. And as you can see, there was still a tiny hair of warping, but certainly not something that you couldn't work with. So my advice, if you're going to be painting your walls, is to paint them first. Do that weighting down, make sure your walls are as straight as you can get them, and then install them into your house. As I added the cardstock to one single layer, again weighted it, let it dry, and then attached it to the second layer of foam board. And that result was that there was absolutely no warping in the foam board, which, you know, is what we're hoping for. Okay, hopefully that camera angle works well. So 2 things you should do before you glue it in place. The first one is a dry fit. I always recommend this before you start gluing, because if you're like me, and like I said, I'm measurement challenged, you want to make sure that it's the right length and that it's going to fit, first of all. The second thing is, before you glue anything onto this strip where the walls are going to go, you'll want to go in and sand it. If you leave it smooth like the rest, the glue doesn't really have a lot to adhere to. So if you just go in lightly with some sandpaper and you rough that up a little bit, your glue will stick much better. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I will eventually do that to all of the walls before I glue them in place. Off some of that excess. And now we're going to put some glue on the wall. Now, you can use craft glue or wood glue. Either one will work. But I already have my wood glue out, and there is some wood pieces, so that's what I'm going to use. And I'm going to put a fairly, not so gaping that it's, hopefully it's not going to squeeze out everywhere, but you definitely want to have enough glue on there so that it catches the whole side. So, and the right way. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put that in place. Now, a few things that I can use to make sure it stays up nice and square is, of course, a square. So I'll put that there. And these setup blocks actually work really well as well. And I'm just going to put them on their side on either side. I just want to turn this just a little bit so you can see what I mean about the setup blocks in the back. Oops, oops, knocking everything off. So hopefully you can see that. So those blocks are just holding up that side of the wall so that when the square is pushed up against, it has something solid to sit against. So we're just going to leave that like that until it's completely dry. And we have our first standing wall. I don't know about you, this makes me very happy. Everything fit really well. It stayed in place well. And so the next section that I'm going to do is this wall in between the bedroom and the kitchen. Make sure you can see that. This wall does also have a doorway, but there's an actual closing door that'll go in here. So the door frame will be a little bit different from what we did in this entryway. And I'm not going to put the door in right away, but I am going to cut the hole for it. Other than that, it really is the exact same process as this wall. The only maybe small difference is when you're cutting the wall now, an intersecting wall, you only have to put the dowel on one side, because in this case anyway, I'm going to be building off of this wall, and so I already have a dowel on that side, right? So I just need the dowel on this side. But other than that, the process is exactly the same. So I'm not going to do it on camera. I feel like you've probably gotten enough from just watching this one. Dun, da, da, da! We have walls. As you can see, there's still a little bit of work to do on the walls. You can see where the two walls intersect, that there is a bit of a gap there that I need to fill. And you can also probably see that there's a tiny bit of a gap along the floor as well. Now, I'm not too worried about the gap on the floor, because when I put the flooring in, the flooring is about 2 millimeters maybe, which is going to cover a lot of that gap already. But even if it doesn't, there is a plan to put some baseboards in as well, so you will never see these gaps that are on the floor. The ones in between the walls, though, we need to do something about. I had a couple different ideas. My first thought was to just use a patch similar to what I did to cover up the wooden pieces. What I decided to do instead is to put a drywall compound in those corners. And so I'm just using, well, you can use whatever kind of drywall mud you can find, but this is just called Fast and Final. It's just a patch and primer in one. It's very lightweight, which means it's easy to manipulate with your fingers. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to take little bits of it and just push it into those gaps, and then I'll take a stick and just scrape off as much as I possibly can off of each side, so that hopefully when I'm done, the spackle will only be then inside of the gap. So I'm going to try that. So I'm sorry if my hands cover up the camera. And then I've just cut up a coffee stir stick. I've just cut the top off so it's not rounded, and then I filed down with a little bit of sandpaper to make it a little sharper. And I'm just going to go over now and just scrape as much off of the sides of that as I can. So once that's dried, I'll go in with some light sandpaper and take off any excess, but I think that filled the gap really well. I also want to touch up a few of these areas where the wall attached to the wood dowel, because I do see that there's some gapping in a few of those little places. So I'm going to go ahead and fill those as well. I finished covering all of the templates now with the flooring, but before we can install it, we have a couple more things that we need to do. So I'm just going to move aside the living room and the bedroom porch area, and we're going to look at the kitchen area first. So in this kitchen, there was a trap door that went down into the root cellar, and I want to recreate that trap door. Obviously, it's not going to open to a cellar, but I want to make it look like it would open if we wanted it to. So I have cut out a little template for the size of the trapdoor. Now, normally in real house size, a trapdoor like that would be approximately 2.5 feet wide and about 3 feet deep. So in miniature size, 2.5 inches by 3 inches is probably close to the right size. So it was somewhere in around here. And I'm just going to use the template to draw in, maybe it was closer to here, to just do a pencil drawing of that area. All right, hopefully you can see that pencil drawing. Now I'm just going to take my X-Acto knife and I'm going to just basically cut through the cardstock and a tiny bit of the chipboard underneath. We're not going to cut all the way through. Just basically a light score. And then I'm going to take my embossing tool and just lightly go over that line just to make a bit of an indent where the cut mark is. So now it looks like there's actually a break in the floor. Now there was a little ring that sat, which is what they used to pull the door open. So I found these little jump rings at the dollar store, which are primarily for making jewelry. And you can see that they're just little silver rings. So I'm going to use that as a ring to pull that up. So let's first measure out where the middle of that door will be. So I'm going to make a little mark at the 1 1/4. So it will sit right about there. So I'm going to try and make a little circle. Around the ring. It's not easy with my big fingers in the way. Maybe we can get close. Close. Look at that. All right. And then I'm just going to take my X-Acto knife and cut just a little ways again through. And I'm going to cut another ring just inside. Oh, just going to test one more time. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to try and just kind of pick up this flooring. Because I do want that ring to sit down in the floor. It wasn't something that you felt if you were standing on it. It did kind of sit down so the top of the ring was flush with the floor. So that's what I'm going to attempt to do. This last little piece. There we go. And then I'm going to use my embossing tool once again and just push that cardboard down just a touch. Then when I take my ring, it's not quite flush, but it's pretty close. Just go push that down just a little bit more. Oh, and there went my ring. Good thing I have lots. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and glue that in. Just want to make sure that the ring is not overlapping itself here. There we go. And for this, I'm just going to use just a little bit of craft glue. So I'll just use my little template because I no longer need it. And my favorite applicator, which is a toothpick. Clip the end off of that. Just use the toothpick to just run a little bit of glue in that circle. And then we'll place our ring. Now, it looks like it has a ring to pull that door up. That's really, it's just more aesthetic. It's certainly not a functioning trap door, but it looks like it should be there. I wanted to show you a couple of different ways to lay down the floor. Just so you have a comparison. I know for me personally, I'm kind of curious as to whether or not one works better than the other. So the first one is just your basic method of gluing it down. And this really isn't anything different than what we've been doing up until this point with gluing. So we're just going to put a layer of glue on the back side and slide it in and let it dry. So just going to slide that in. Give it a press. And then I'm just going to weight it down, of course. And we'll let that dry and see how that goes. The other way that I wanted to try today was I wanted to try that two-sided tape to see how well it stuck the floor down. So I'm going to do the porch in this tape, and as you can see, I've already put my tape on it. Oh, there it is. This is a little trickier because it's a one-shot deal. It doesn't pull back up if you don't have it on there straight, so. But of course there's no moisture with that tape, so I think it's going to work really well actually. Yeah, and you know, the nice thing about that is you don't have to weight it down and you don't have to wait for it to dry. I have finished putting the floors in place. I did opt to go with the two-sided tape for the remainder of the house. But in all honesty, as far as quality is concerned, there really was no difference between gluing it down or using the two-sided tape. Both of them held the exact same way. The only reason that I decided to go with the two-sided tape was really more for convenience, because with the two-sided tape, I didn't have to wait for anything to dry, I didn't have to weight anything down. I just stuck it, pressed it really good with my hand, and it was done. So our floors are in. So I'm going to end this video on this happy note that we've gotten this far. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please consider subscribing to the channel. And I will see you in the next one. Until then, happy crafting.